Good Wednesday afternoon to you. It's 4 o'clock, time for Sports4CLE. Thanks for joining us. Hope you're having a good day. Browns a day off in West Virginia at the Greenbrier. No practice for the players today. They'll be back at it tomorrow and in pads the next couple of days. Take a listen to Jake Trotter, Browns beat reporter for ESPN. This is on ESPN Cleveland this morning, talking about the relationship between Deshaun Watson and Kevin Stefanski.
You can tell that Deshaun really believes in Kevin, and I think that's a big storyline to follow these first 3, 4, 5 games. Like, how does that look? Like, is Kevin getting the best out of Deshaun? Does Deshaun look like his 2020, 2019 self because of some of the plays that in positions that Kevin's putting him in? So that was kind of like something that I think stood out for me. So yeah, it was. I mean, it's just. You can't compare anything to last year. It was a total circus last year.
With that, let's welcome in G. Bush from 92.3 The Fans, The Barbershop, as well as the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show. And G. Bush, when we talked, that's one of the things that I wanted to hear, that Stefanski and Deshaun Watson are kind of joined at the hip and believe in each other, because that's the type of quarterback-head coach relationship we haven't necessarily had, and you need that if you're going to be a successful team.
Yeah, this is going to be the first year we actually see one of those relationships. You know, I've always been jealous of at afar looking at other quarterbacks and how those quarterbacks and their head coach or the play callers talk about one another. They talk about getting on the same page, going over the call sheet to figure out what plays they like to run better. I like a collaborative effort. I think that's the best way to do it. And it also shows you that you have a quarterback that can accept those challenges and take it mentally as well as physically deliver with the way it needs to be delivered once they draw it up. So for me, I've always said that I wanted both of those guys to have skin in the game. Yes, Coach Stefanski is going to be calling the play calls, but Deshaun Watson has to approve those. And by any means, if Deshaun doesn't like those plays, he should be vocal enough to say, look, I'm not comfortable running that. I think we should run this, and they should have a collaborative effort. You watch the way Andy Reid and you watch the way Patrick Mahomes deal with one another, and they talk about what they like, what they don't like. They have supreme confidence in one another. And so when you got confidence that you got a guy that that is coming up with the plays, and you guys are confident that you put the game plan in together. So at the end of the game, when they get out there and if it doesn't go well or it doesn't, hit the way it's supposed to, both guys can come out and say, look, that's on us or that's on me. And they can take that blame, because guess what? They both sat there. They both picked the plays. They both thought that was a game plan that was going to work. And if it doesn't, they had to just take responsibility for it. And that's what it comes with the territory when you do have a franchise quarterback. No more is it just, hey, get it to the line of scrimmage and run the play we gave you. Baker wasn't allowed to do that. And there's a lot of quarterbacks, younger quarterbacks and quarterbacks that are just journeymen. Those guys don't have an opportunity to get up there and have the command of the entire playbook. So I'm excited for the first time to see a quarterback with that type of autonomy. And we haven't really seen it since Bernie Kosar, who was one of the guys back in the 80s calling his own plays, run, pass, and everything else at the line of scrimmage. So I'm excited to see what the new evolution in the offense is.
Yeah, I'm with you. And the thing that, in my mind, the X's and O's that Kevin Stefanski draws up, they're good. But it has to be through the eyes of the guy that is expected to execute it. And that's kind of what you're saying. So last night, the quarterback market took another big one up off the top. Take a look at this. Justin Herbert, 5-year, $62.5 million extension with the Chargers. Joe Burrow still coming. But here are the richest contracts in NFL history based on average annual value. This is per over the cap, the 33rd team. That's NFL executives and scouts tweeting this out. Herbert, now the highest paid, $52.5 million. Lamar Jackson, $52. Jalen Hurts, $50. Aaron Rodgers, $50.27. Russell Wilson, $49. Kyler Murray, $46.1. Ahead of Deshaun Watson, who is now 7th at $46. Mahomes, the best of them all, $45, because his was done the latest. Now, Average value in the NFL, how, when you spread out the terms of the contract, that's how much per season. A lot of people, and I'm talking to the folks that email me, make a big deal about the guaranteed money. It only matters if there's a reason to cut a starting quarterback on a long-term deal. And I went back and finally, I couldn't remember the last time a quarterback who was getting paid a lot of money got cut. It was Peyton Manning with the Colts, and I think his guarantee was something like 26 million, and that was after he hadn't played for 19 months and had neck surgery. And then he ended up going and playing well with the Broncos. So the guaranteed was, it's a reason to get the guy to come to your franchise. At the end of the day, you're not moving away from a guy that you gave up 3 first-round picks and have been trying to find since the franchise came back in 1999.
You know what I've done, and like you, I've been doing some searching. I've been doing some soul searching, not really statistically wise, or looking at the financial documents to figure out what quarterback got a huge boatload of guaranteed money that you had to cut or you had to move on from. So I'm glad you did that part. I've done the other part. What I've found out is, I've done the code words. So there's code words in the NFL, and when you're talking about sports, there's lots of code words there. And we'll throw it out there and say, if you're more quick than fast, that means you're not a guy that, you can move some people out of the way with some jukes, but you're not running away from anybody. Or, he's a guy that's not going to hurt you. We're going to ask him to minimize the turnovers and manage the game. That means you just can't throw the ball that well. And the more you throw it, you throw interceptions. So the code word now for 238 or how many other $1 million that Deshaun Watson has as a guarantee, that code is for, I'm not sold on Deshaun Watson, A. B, I might be slightly still upset that I felt like the quarterback here was the quarterback for us, and he's no longer here. Or C, or a little bit of combination of both. You may not like the allegations that came with him. You don't definitely like the fact that, maybe your favorite player, number 6, is gone. And then on top of that, maybe you just don't like, you think that he's worth all of that money. So what it comes out to be is you can't say he's, you can't fault the organization for going to get a guy whose numbers look the way they look before the last 6 games. So you can't say anything about it. You can't say he can't play football because you've seen him play and he has that talent level. So the only thing you can legitimately say to kind of throw something out there is, well, the guaranteed money, I just don't think anybody is worth that. But if you look at the climate, if you look at football, if you know football and you know what everything looks like, every year there's a new quarterback. The money goes up every year, just like the cap goes up pretty much every single year. So they're not paying you based on how good you are. They're paying you on the quarterback market. And so that is what it is. And when Joe Burrow gets his deal, what's the name's deal? Deshaun Watson deal starts to look a lot better again. So now you look at some of these names and you could argue, well, Kyler Murray, is he better than Deshaun Watson? I mean, start looking around. Justin Herbert hasn't won a thing. Hey, listen, I'm sure they will want to get out of Russell Wilson's deal in Denver. So you start to see these deals get done, and then that Watson deal starts to be regular. At the end of his contract, it'll almost look like a bargain, given the fact that Lawrence has to get Trevor Lawrence has to get another deal. Joe Burrow's on his way up to get a whole nother deal. There'll be a lot of guys that are up again for their deals, and they'll make that money that he got looks like a dwarf money. So I think it dwarfs the value of what's out there. At the end of the day, I think people just are not sold on Deshaun Watson when they say that. And if he comes out and plays well in the first 3 games, that contract will continue to look better.
I'm with you. All right, Jason McIntyre, this from The Herd with Colin Cowherd, talking about where Kevin Stefanski, Deshaun Watson rank among that quarterback head coach duo in the NFL heading into this year.
Number 10. Let's go with Kevin Stefanski and Deshaun Watson. I know that's not going to be popular since Watson was so putrid last year, and Stefanski may be coaching for his job. This is kind of a buy low for me. Stefanski, remember, he was the guy who took Baker Mayfield, to the playoffs, and they pushed the Chiefs in the game where Mahomes kind of dinged his head, and the Browns could have had a shot. Stefanski didn't totally trust Mayfield. You knew that was the beginning of the end. And Watson, when healthy and not suspended and in trouble with the law, was phenomenal in Houston. Last year, he had the suspension. I mean, he basically was out for a year and a half. And my guess is Deshaun Watson returns to form. Stefanski and the Browns are good. Remember, Vegas has them at 9.5. I don't totally see it, but I'm not going to discount them because I trust the guys in the desert. So number 10, Stefanski and Deshaun Watson.
And G. Bush, if he doesn't get back to if he doesn't get back to the top 10, I will be shocked being Deshaun Watson. I'll be surprised.
Yeah, he'll be good next year, and then we'll get ready to run all the storylines. You know how it goes. We always knew Deshaun Watson. Talent has never been an issue for Deshaun Watson. It was all about if he could move back and get past the allegations. Obviously, he's settled in now. And look at this Cleveland Browns offense. Look what they did last week. Over 340 yards in the air, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, and they still got that offensive line. And Nick Chubb. Oh, listen, this team is going to be there all year. And that's after the first 2 games. You know how it goes. That's the talking points, man. Like, it's so easy a caveman can do it. We understand what it is. You're down now, but you got to have a storyline to come up through the season. And to be honest, I think he's going to be comeback player of the year material. I don't think they'll give it to him because of what he came back from. But at the end of the day, that's fine with Browns fans. And I told Browns fans in the video I just put out, said, look, man, it's not our job to help the national media figure out whether or not how did the Browns go after a guy like that. We got a quarterback. We looking to see what's going to happen on the field. And 10 actually is kind of low a little bit. At the ceiling, you take a look at what those 2 individual coaches have done with their ceiling. We know what Kevin Stefanski's ceiling is. It's coach of the year. He's already done that before. We know what Deshaun Watson's ceiling kind of looks like. We've seen it, almost 40 to 40 some touchdowns and less than 6 or 7 interceptions and over 4,700 yards, right? And that's still giving you something on the ground. So we've already seen these guys at their best, their peak, so to speak. And if Deshaun Watson can come back and basically just have the same season he's having with the Houston Texans, the Browns are going to be a dangerous football team. And I think everybody right now is kind of with their fingers crossed. Like, I hope they don't get a good we don't know. We hope this doesn't happen. But I'm going to tell you what, Deshaun Watson's going to be good next year. 9.5 is not the number. I definitely got the Browns winning 11 games next year and making the playoffs.
I think 10 is the floor. The ceiling's probably 2, 3, 4, something along those lines. This is really interesting. So Jack Duffin does great stuff with salary cap and contracts. He has done the work here. Largest deals signed in 2011 and 2023 average per year. Quarterbacks in 2011, it was an $18 million a year average. 2023, 52.5. That's an increase of 292%. And take a look at the running backs. We've talked about this. There's the numbers to back it up. 14.2 in 2011, 11.5, a change of 81%, and that is negative. So it's 81% has been deducted from the highest value of a running back contract. That puts into perspective just how devalued the running back position is and how valued the quarterback position is.
I'm looking at it like cyclically. I remember a couple years ago, remember a couple years ago that the Browns took Kellen Winslow Jr. in the top 5 or top 10. Eric Ebron went top 10, I think. And even Kyle Pitts has gone. He went top 10 or whatever to the Falcons. What you started to see is back in the day, people thought you would never Why would you draft a tight end in the first round? They're glorified blockers, and we're only going to throw them the ball 5-6 yards down the field anyway. How many touchdowns are they going to catch? And then you started seeing, your basketball players and all your athletes, long, rangy athletes, 6'5", 6'6", 6'7" guys that are red zone targets that can run, were physical, could out jump corners and be big on safeties, run away from linebackers. And then all of a sudden you started to see the game switch. You got your Kelce's and your Kittles, and you got, guys that are very physical, Gronk, all those guys. You get guys that can run and be basketball players out there. So they became the new wave in the NFL. And so what happened? People started drafting them. People started converting those guys. Then you started seeing guys that usually would be traditional fullbacks no longer in the game. They got rid of that. But I think everything is cyclical a little bit. And I'll say this. All it takes is one team to figure out a way to incorporate running backs. And I say it like this. If you're going to have all these receivers on the field, the team that learns to run the football while having multiple receivers on the field, 3-4 receivers all the time, that team is going to cause it's going to bring back the running back emphasis, because when you have a running back and you can run the ball, when you have 4 receivers in the game or 3 receivers in the game, what happens is he's running the ball against linebackers that are your second team linebackers. They're not just starting strong side or Mike linebacker. You're subbing in your nickel package with linebackers that can cover. So now you already got guys that aren't really the best at tackling, because people don't tackle anymore in the NFL, especially in the offseason. Then you got linebackers on the field that don't really necessarily are for tackling anyway, because they're coverage linebackers. And then you have to sub in the diamond nickel package 2 more cornerbacks. And those cornerbacks, when you're in the game, have responsibility to contain and gap assignment. So if you get a team with, I said, Nick Chubb, and you get somebody with Deshaun Watson that can move, how do you stop Nick Chubb running downhill against small corners and linebackers that may weigh 210, 215? How do you stop that attack when you may have the combined quarterback runs where Nick Chubb leads in and Deshaun Watson is running the power play? How do you stop that if you still have Elijah Moore and some of the guys out here running jet motion, getting people out of the box and running the football? The team that's able to run out of those formations because there's so many DBs nowadays is going to have a distinct advantage. So I think running backs are still important. It's just going to take a team to find a creative way to feature those running backs, and then everybody else is going to catch up and say, well, hold on. There is some value in being said that I'm going to have a running back out here with guys that are a mismatch. Instead of 5.2 yards per carry, who knows? Nick Chubb might average 6.2 next year.
It'll be fun to watch, without question. G. Bush and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. We'll head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason when we return. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to OhioLottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. We continue talking Browns with G. Bush from 92.3 The Fan and the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show. This from ESPN.com. They did a section with players and coaches with the most riding on the 2023 season. One of the guys they have on there, Kevin Stefanski. They say after a full season, the hope is that Stefanski and Watson will be on the same page 2023. If they aren't, well, one of those parties has a fully guaranteed contract for $230 million. No Browns coach has survived 3 consecutive losing seasons since Bill Belichick in the early 1990s. Also, want to mention Baker Mayfield is on this list, saying Tampa Bay is likely the, quote, last chance saloon for Baker. Baker's not our concern, G. Bush. Kevin Stefanski, you got to win in the NFL, so I get it. If they find a way to win 10 games and don't make the playoffs, it's different than if they win 7 or 8 games and don't make the playoffs.
Yeah, here's the only thing I think. The only way I think the Browns can have a bad season or a sub 500 season is, and Kevin Stefanski keep his job, is if Deshaun Watson, God forbid, gets hurt sometime in the first couple games. Or he comes out in the first few games and he's throwing for 300 a game, look really good. The Browns are winning, and all of a sudden he gets injured for the whole year. I think that they would consider bringing him back because it looked like it possibly could turn around. But if they don't jump off the gates and he's not hurt and they just basically play bad, Kevin Stefanski is out of here. I mean, that's just what it is. It was always, and I've always kept this timeline. I've always kept it since the Browns came. I think want to go back to 2018, 2019, since they tore it all the way down to the stubs. Go back and watch the progression. The first progression was they hired Freddie Kitchens, right? They hired Freddie. Guess what? He got fired. He was the first one to go. Then you got everybody else in here. Everything was going well. Then it was Jarvis and Odell. They were the second to go. So you get rid of receivers before your quarterbacks because the quarterback is more important. Baker was the last man standing at that point. Then Baker had his situation with the torn labrum. He was throwing guys under the bus. He was a locker room problem. He had everything split. His wife was saying stuff on the media. Then he was the next thing gone after they got Deshaun Watson. Now the only two parties left are Andrew Berry, or Deep Podesta, but he's like Dr. Claw from Inspector Gadget. No one sees him. He's just a shifty, shadowy character petting a cat somewhere. I don't know what he's doing and what his job is. Still, somebody can find it. But you got Andrew Berry and Stefanski. Stefanski is the next guy up. You've gotten your coach. You got your quarterback that you wanted. Now it's time to get things hitting on all cylinders. And I'm going to tell you what. The reason why they're in West Virginia isn't team building exercises. People say that all they want. That what they're doing is they're telling their guys they're trying to build a sense of urgency. And sometimes you got to get somebody's attention before they even go out on the field. They are in West Virginia to understand the gravity of what this season means for a lot of careers. Guys we love, Stefanski, whether he's going to be back, Barry, Deep Podesta, and then your players, Myles Garrett, Nick Chubb, some of your favorites, Joe Bitonio, Teller will probably be gone. If they don't get it done, understand the consequences out there in Cleveland Browns land. Because at the end of the day, we don't want to go back to 1-15 to 1-16. But it's going to be a rebuild if they don't make the playoffs this year, which is the hardest thing for me to say.
All right, before we go to break, let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason for the first time today.
If I was Kevin Stefanski, I'd be excited about this defense that Jim Schwartz is coaching, because the fact that they were in the goal line in training camp and the offense only scored 4 touchdowns and they basically ran about 15 to 16 plays. I wanted to see the man coverage. I wanted to see how well these DBs are and the depth behind the starters and everything else like that. So I'm excited. I know Kevin's excited. I know Jim is excited. These are some dogs that we have in the secondary, and it's showing. The players are starting to get it. I thought it was going to be a little bit more time, but they're getting it. And I think they're a lot more comfortable. They're not thinking as much. It just seems all fluid. It just seems all natural. It just seems instinctual, and that's what we want to see. That's what we want these Browns defenders to do.
G-Bush, I'm anxious to see him in pads, because that's when we're going to get to see what this scheme and what the D-line looks like.
Yeah, we were talking about it today on the show, and it was like, you're not going to be able to see. They've had Greg Newsome working under the slot pretty much more than anybody else. As Greg has said before, I think Greg changed his jersey number because Greg had to get a little bit tougher. Sometimes, when I was growing up, man, my mom used to say, "This is what we gonna need to eat for that day," and I'm like, "I don't want that." She'd be like, "Well, listen, that food will sit there. You'll eat it before it eats you." And and I'm like, "Oh yeah." So after a while, you come back to that table, you look on the table, be like, "Man, I am kind of hungry. I might as well go ahead and eat this before I go to sleep." Now, Greg Newsome, he was talking about he didn't want to play no corner. I don't want to play slot corner. And somebody must have got in his ear and be like, hey, I don't know what you need to do, my brother, but what you need to do is you need to wrap your mind around it. If it take you changing your number to 0 to figure out if you like it, please by all means do so. So he's trying to turn over a new leaf. I'll say this. I can't wait for the pass to come on. They're going to have a very interesting group up front because they're going to rush the passer. They're going to run. Their job is to get into the backfield. And for once, this is a time when I could actually see an aggressive coordinator physically letting loose his dogs of war, letting no guys go out there and roam. And, last year under Joe Woods, it just looked like they was tentative, soft, didn't know what was coming, and unprepared. This year, I plan on seeing guys move after the quarterback, doing what they need to do, and playing a little more aggressive on the outside and playing the routes because the pressure is going to be there. They'll throw you a couple. Your job is to make sure you're in position to catch them.
G. Bush and I are going to step aside, take another timeout. Other side of the break, what's the biggest acquisition the Browns made in the offseason? Straight ahead on Sports4CLE. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with G. Bush from 92.3 The Fan and the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show. Tony Rizzo from ESPN Cleveland talking about the most important acquisition the Browns had this offseason.
I thought the biggest acquisition for the Browns this year was Schwartz and Schwartz's defense. Everywhere Jim Schwartz goes, the defense improves.
Yep.
It's fact.
Yep.
It's backed up by numbers, wins, point totals. He has improved the defense everywhere he's gone. He won a Super Bowl.
They went out and hired a guy who's been a defensive coordinator pro for the last 25 years in the NFL.
G. Bush, it gives them an instant identity, and the identity is one that likes to push and create havoc at the line of scrimmage. And that will be a welcome change.
Yeah. Oh, listen, it'll be, it's night and day. Like, I was one of the biggest, voices to say, nah, this Joe Woods thing is not working right now. Look what's going on the field. Missed assignments, not strong tacklers, no aggressiveness. And so I would say I love the acquisition of Jim Schwartz. But at the end of the day, coaches don't coach. Coaches don't play, they coach. So it's up to the people in the field to execute what the coach is calling. And the guy that I think is the biggest upgrade for the Cleveland Browns is Darius Smith. By far the best pass rusher skill set of anybody who's ever played opposite of Myles Garrett. He's a guy who has a motor. He's a guy who's going to challenge Myles Garrett. If you watch some of these drills, him and Myles Garrett are always at the front of the line competing, whether it's on get-offs to see who can get to the quarterback fast enough, whether it's on who has the best pass rush move or any of those things. And I think that's going to propel him to continue to strive, to continue to put maximum effort out. Not saying that he does not put out maximum effort, but I'm just saying he's going to have some competition there. I think Zadarius Smith is a guy that almost puts the Browns defensive line over top to a point where you have to say they're a top 5 defensive line. Given what Obu Aranco can do, Dalvin Tomlinson is a guy who can show some wiggle in there. Not much known for as pass rush, but surprisingly can collapse a pocket. And that's what they want them to do in those wide 9 techniques, is just collapse the pocket. So I think when you have a Jim Schwartz, who is probably, one of the best signings I could think of the Browns had in the last many years, you hope that translates into unlocking that mythical second tier for Myles Garrett and unlocking that everyday pass rusher and Okoronkwo, and then with Zadarius Smith, how can you use him with his versatility? He'll play in 3, he'll play on the edge. So yeah, I think the biggest one is Zadarius Smith, but I will say Just because players don't, coaches don't play, I think Jim Schwartz is a valuable part. I just can't put a coach ahead of a player, given the fact that that player is going to have a really good opportunity to impact the game.
So Myles Garrett talked yesterday just about all the additions on defense, including Jim Schwartz, and what it means to the unit.
He's one of those guys I mentioned earlier with was a lighthearted, great sense of humor, fun guy, but has a lot of knowledge to bring to the room and plenty of experience. More experience than we'll leave anyone else in our D-line room. And he's been there. He's been to the precipice. He's been to the top of the hill, and he knows what it's supposed to look like. He's worked with some of the very best in the game, and we just have to be willing to listen. We have to be give him our undivided attention and allow him to lead us when the time comes.
With Jim Schwartz's fiery personality, does it take a while to get used to that?
I've had a couple fiery personalities.
Has he gotten in your face at all yet? I mean, it seems like he's that kind of guy.
If he does, just listen. I know, and we know that he wants the best for us. He's excited. He's excited for this opportunity that he has working with this team, and we should be just as excited and fired up, that he's here and he's so fired up about winning with this team and putting his best foot forward. He came here because he knew this team really had a chance to be special, and we have to. And we'd be remiss in letting him down and letting ourselves down if we didn't take that opportunity by the horns and just go.
And obviously, Zadarius Smith is who Myles Garrett was speaking about before Jim Schwartz. But again, those are the type of things you want to hear as training camp wraps up. You can't tell a lot, but you get a sense the guys on defense think they're not coming out and saying we can be great, but they're coming out and saying, we have the pieces there to be a really good unit.
Yeah, and they know that. They see it in the practice room. They see it translates. And going from what they went to last year, where they couldn't stop the run, people would run for 150, 160, 107 yards, and then they couldn't stop the pass. So, because they had missed assignments and busted coverages. So, if you can just eliminate half of those, look how many plays that you left on the field where you could have possibly got points for. And I like what he says. He didn't throw anybody under the bus like, Malik Jackson or different people who's questioning his leadership style. And I always just I always go to this, man. When you're in corporate America, and I used to do hiring, when I was hiring somebody, I needed to make sure that they were able to do something regardless of leadership, right? You were your own self-starter. The Cleveland Browns, if they want to get to a place where they're in contention for playoffs and contending each and every year, you need people that are self-disciplined, self-motivated, and that's going to help and go out and find different ways to get better. And sometimes I think in our city especially, is we need to have somebody we can point to that said, this is the reason that the Cleveland Browns aren't good is because of that. And so instead of being able to break it down in layers to say, well, the Browns have a problem with special teams, why? Is it, if the Browns have a special team on defense, why? All of those things are you're trying to diagnose and figure out. And if you go about doing that, one of the things I think that's going to make the Cleveland Browns just a more overall solid team in general is if the players are all bought in to their assignments and what we need to do, and the coaches are saying, I'm dialed into my assignment, what we need to do, and they come together and say, man, if you just do your job, everything will be great. And so good job, on Zadarius Smith. I want Myles Garrett to go out there, raise havoc, get the quarterback, and I want Zadarius Smith to do the same thing. But I need them to be self-motivated to do it. Leadership sounds good. Leadership is something that you definitely need. But guess what? You can get that from a lot of places. A coach can give you that, a general manager can get a quarterback, a running back, wherever the case may be. But at the end of the day, everybody has to carry their own weight and be mature themselves.
Jay Bush and I are going to take one more time out. On the other side of the break, we'll continue talking Browns training camp. Sports for CLE. We'll be right back. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. We continue talking Browns with G. Bush from 92.3 The Fan, as well as the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show. This is from Dog Pound Daily. Early standouts at Browns training camp. Now, again, they're not in pads and all that, but Jakeem Grant, Sione Takitaki, two guys coming back from injury, check in at number 3. Jim Schwartz, defensive coordinator, checks in at number 2. And they say David Bell, the wide receiver. And when you look at those early standouts, G. Bush, Grant, Takitaki, Bell, all really need to have strong camps to kind of lock in and solidify what their roles are going to be.
Well, I look at the guys that they mentioned. Takitaki is a guy who saw him in some warm-up drills. I think he's going to come back fully healthy, and they're going to need him because right now they're running 2 guys. I don't even know what their names are. I think Phillips is one of them. They're running another guy at middle linebacker who I have no clue who it is. Just looking at the depth chart. But he's going to be a really big, important part. Jakeem Grant is going to be a really important part because now you look at Marquise Goodwin going down indefinitely, and people don't forget, I'm not wishing this on anybody or anything, but Chris Bosh had those blood clots, what made it very difficult for him and made him retire ultimately. And that was just basketball. It wasn't a contact sport like football. So I don't know all the ins and outs of having blood clots, but I know it's dangerous, and it can derail your career. So they had that level of Olympic speed out there, guys that were burners, and you have Marquise Goodwin being out, and you have Anthony Schwartz being out for a couple of weeks because of a hamstring. So now, where do you get that vertical threat from? Where do you get that guy on the outside that can run past people to open the game up to the other guys, the intermediate roles, the running backs, fullbacks, tight ends, just wide receivers running the shallow routes. So when you look at all this, I just take a look at it and say, Takitaki is going to have to come back ready. Phillips is already playing. He's going to have to come back ready. And JOK, to me, has to have one of his best years of his life, given the fact that he's an undersized linebacker. He's going to have to figure out a way to fight over blocks, fit through double teams. He did not do a good job of that last year. So, all those things are something that you got to think about moving forward into this year.
All right, this from BrownsWire.com. 3 potential training camp trade candidates from the Browns. They say Donovan Peoples-Jones, and we'll come back to him. Joshua Dobbs and Nick Harris are the 3. About Peoples-Jones, after selecting Cedric Tillman in the 3rd round, wide receiver with a similar skill set, Peoples-Jones, Browns could look to get something in return. No trade talks on a contract extension between the Browns and Peoples-Jones, so the possibility does exist. I'd be surprised if they trade Donovan Peoples-Jones, especially because we mentioned Marquise Goodwin. Nick Harris is a guy that I think they think can play. He was going to be the starting center. So if somebody's willing to trade them, a 6th, maybe even a 7th round draft pick, and they feel comfortable enough with what they see from Luke Whippler, I think of all of them, Nick Harris is the one that makes sense. Joshua Dobbs, they're not going to trade him unless somebody gives them something that would make him their starting quarterback.
Yeah. You know what the thing about Nick Harris is, though? Nick Harris is a guy who has some playing experience at guard out of Washington. He was the starting center, only played 1 game, blew out his knee in the first preseason game last year against the Jacksonville Jaguars. And I'll tell you what, Nick Harris is a guy that gives you some versatility. Say, for instance, next year, you got to move on from Teller, or Wyatt Teller, if you have to move on from him. If you need a backup center, this is a guy that could play both guard positions. He could play the center position. That's where he started from. And you could get him on the cheap. So I look at it like this. he's a guy that could potentially make that roster. I think he's a guy that you really have to look out for because to me, he's too good of a football player to just cut outright and right. And then when you talk about trading individuals on the offensive side of the ball, the Donovan Peoples-Jones one doesn't make sense to me. Because Donovan Peoples-Jones is in his last contract year, so you got a guy that's motivated. You got a guy that knows the offense, has been in offense multiple years. He's playing with Deshaun Watson, which is going to be his best quarterback he's ever played with. And you need guys to play. We already got 3 or 4 guys that are out on injury, not knowing when Marquise Goodwin is coming back. So it'll be foolhardy in that circumstances to get rid of a player who probably is your second or third best playmaker out there, behind Elijah Moore. And that gives Elijah Moore more room to work because you can use DPJ on some of the routes, some of the digs, some of the square ends that he's going to run, and you can still do some things with Elijah Moore. So, unfortunately, I wouldn't trade either one of those guys because actually I think those guys can help you this year, and that's what you need. You don't need to count on rookies when you're at this stage of your building project. You need to get veterans that know what they need to do so they can get in, get your job done, and they don't need much training in the offseason.
It is definitely win now mode for the Browns without question. G. Bush, great stuff as always. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, G. Bush.
All right, you guys have a good rest of your day.
All right, G. Bush, make sure you're checking out Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show Monday through Friday, 11 to 1. You can also check it out on Barbershop, 92.3 The Fan, Saturday mornings from 8 o'clock until noon. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. Jacob Roach from BrownsWire.com on the other side of the break. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to OhioLottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
The Greater Cleveland Sports Hall of Fame celebrates the star athletes and notable sports figures who were born or have made their home in Greater Cleveland. It tells the story of discipline, commitment, perseverance, sportsmanship, and excellence in achievement. It encourages and inspires those who believe in sport and its direct impact on the well-being of our community. Go to clevelandsportshall.com or follow us on Twitter at GCLE Sports HOF for more details.
We continue talking Browns here on Sports4CLE. Without question, Myles Garrett has had a really good first several years to his career. In fact, stacks a couple more like he's had the last couple of years onto the end of that, and it could be a Hall of Fame career. Garrett was asked where he wants his career to go moving forward.
I mean, I want us to win. We all want to win, and that's the only goal for us at this point. Just one day at a time, one step at a time, one rep at a time. Just having your mind focus on just that one. You know, once you break it down and make it simple, it's easier for yourself to get in the zone, not to get distracted or lose focus of what's out there, what's to be. Everybody wants to win the Super Bowl, but you win it by taking that first step, not worrying about that first game. Once you perfect those steps, that rep, that technique, then you start to break it down once you finally get to those moments, and they come so smoothly. And you're a technician at what you do, and that's how really great teams are made.
With that, let's welcome in Jacob Roach from BrownsWire.com. Jacob, staying healthy, an important part of that for Myles Garrett. And I think with the depth and the talent they've added, and by rotating people in, Jim Schwartz is on to keeping him healthy for 17 games.
Yeah, man, absolutely. It just seems like he's had some really great last few seasons, and every time there's something that ends up holding him back. They have the off-the-field injury in the car crash last year. You had the year in which he missed time with COVID, and there's just always something down the stretch that kind of prevents him from being 100%. He had that groin injury against the Raiders a couple of years ago. And this is his best shot by far to accomplish the individual goals and the team goals. I mean, he's set up where he could have a defensive player of the year award type season this year. And you're looking at a defense that is by far the most talented that he has had since he's been here, and by far the best coaching staff that he has had since he's been here. You mentioned Jim Schwartz. Schwartz is really, really good at getting the best out of those defensive linemen. And I think when all of that comes together, they've got great corners covering on the backside. And if they can get after the quarterback like we think they can, it's going to be really fun.
It would appear to match Myles' skill set perfectly, the way Jim Schwartz wants to play. I see that. I know you've written about this. Again, Jacob Roach, BrownsWire.com. Alex Wright, could he be part of the solution at defensive tackle? Just quick review, Perrion Winfrey gone, so there is a need. They were thin there to begin with. Winfrey was a guy who was probably going to get into that rotation. Do you think Wright could step in?
Yeah, absolutely. When you add him with the other edge rusher that can play on the inside, and Zadarius Smith, they added a couple of people that I really think you could see some crazy formations where they put Alex Wright and Zadarius Smith on the inside with Ogbo Okoronkwo and Myles Garrett on the outside when you're talking about rushing the passer, and just put it in this ultimate NASCAR style package with those four players on there. And I think Alex Wright, he struggled some last year. He came out of UAB as this like physical freak. He reminds you kind of the way David Njoku was coming out of Miami, where he's got this size, the unteachable size and athleticism for a guy. You saw him earlier this week, some videos from camp. He's as big as Myles Garrett. Like, he's every bit as big as he is. And we know that Myles is a mountain of a man. So you've got, I think, Alex Wright and Zadarius Smith being able to play the inside in situations where it's pass rush. I think that's why they're totally comfortable with Dalvin Tomlinson and Siaka Ika on the early downs trying to shut down the run. And I just think that Alex Wright was forced to play before he was ready last year. He was just a raw prospect. But his best snaps were on the interior as a defensive tackle, and I think he can make an impact there as a rusher and even a run defender on some of them early downs if Tomlinson and Ika need a break.
Think about the first step of the guys you just talked about: Myles Garrett, Zadarius Smith, Okoronkwo, and if you say Alex Wright. Somebody is going to beat their man, and probably two or three of them are going to have a quick first step on whomever's trying to block them.
Yeah, I hope so. Like, how do you think, like, you can't double team? Who you double teaming? Are you double teaming Zadarius? What if Zadarius Smith is standing next to Myles Garrett? You don't theoretically have enough people to double team both of them. So one of them's potentially, and if you do, you got somebody on the right side like Alex Wright, Okoronkwo. Zadarius Smith last year, even though he dealt with injury, he actually had, according to PFF, more pressures than Myles Garrett. And you're just saying that they have got to just worry about those two somewhere. There is, if Alex Wright, Okoronkwo, even the guys down on the depth chart, if they can't win and be successful with those two on the field opposite them especially, then they're probably not long for the NFL. But you're just looking for anybody that can win one-on-one, and I think you can consistently get one-on-one matchups for guys with that kind of skill set, that it's going to be successful in some way, shape, or form, at least in the pass rush situations.
So on the show, we've done a series where we've looked at what the Browns' defense might look like relative to what Jim Schwartz coached in Philadelphia in 2018. And the thing that stands out, that defensive line was playing in the offensive backfield 3-4 yards just about every play. And if that happens, they have the talent to make that happen. It's a recipe to have a defense that is dominant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. He talks about playing fast and aggressive. That's what Jim Schwartz, we've heard that kind of soundbite several times this offseason from him. He just wants them to play fast, aggressive, downhill football. And we've heard the DBs even talk about it, saying that, like, it's simplistic. Like, they're not trying to go out there and reinvent the wheel. They're going out there and putting their players in the position to do whatever it is that they do best. And that defensive line, what it does best is be aggressive, be explosive off the line of scrimmage, get into the backfield. And that is I mean, this defensive line, especially in pass rush situations, is 100% built to create havoc and live in the back of that. I mean, can you imagine if the man corners that we have only have to hold coverage for like a second and a half? Come on now. That's fun.
Yeah, and you've brought safeties that like to jump routes and make plays on the ball for that very reason. That's the reason you go and you get McLeod and you get Juan Thornhill. All right, before we go to break, you wrote an article, 3 players most to gain in training camp. We've talked a little bit about Alex Wright. Another guy, defensive tackle Maurice Hurst. And that's a guy, if he's healthy, he could solve a lot of the depth issues on the defensive tackle spot, but he hasn't been healthy most of his NFL career. And then Jalen Darden is another intriguing guy who figures to get more of an opportunity the longer Marquise Goodwin is sidelined. So take us through that article and just your thoughts on those 3 guys.
Yeah, with Alex Wright, I think a lot of it had to do with kind of the stuff I touched on a little bit earlier about him being able to play defensive tackle, because they're just desperate at this point to get really good, consistent play. They don't care where it comes from. They'll piece it together. You know, they don't care if they're rotating 5 or 6 guys through there, but they're really trying to figure it out, especially from a pass rush standpoint, because of these explosive high power offenses that we see in the AFC. If you're going to get to the champion, you know, to the Super Bowl through the AFC, you've got to get after the quarterback, and you've got to do it at a very excessive rate. So I think Alex Wright being able to show that he's super versatile and flexible will really help him move kind of up the depth chart in terms of like more playing time and snap counts. And with Maurice Hurst, man, it's like you said, they just need somebody in there. They got to get somebody in there that is not named Alvin Tomlinson to do something. Siaki Ika, he's not really a rusher as much as a big nose that will clog the, you know, rushing lanes. But Maurice Hurst, if you go back and watch Maurice Hurst with the Raiders as a rookie, I think it was 2018, I believe was his rookie year. He was a menace. Like, this dude is explosive. He's strong. There's like a video of him running like 20 miles an hour at 300 pounds on a treadmill that got released earlier this year. And it's just like, that's not humanly possible. I have no idea how you're doing that. But you know, these are these athletic players that can kind of feed off of each other. And I think Hurst is the perfect one. And I thought this before Winfrey went. I thought he is the guy that has the most upside of those random defensive tackles that they added. Him and Tristan, I like Tristan Hill as well. But with Jalen Darden, I thought before Goodwin had the situation that he had, I thought Darden had a really good shot at making this roster. And that's because of his return ability. I don't think Jakeem Grant makes this roster just because you're on the plus side of 30 and you're coming off an Achilles tear and you have never really been consistent on the field as a wide receiver. I think I've seen more from Darden on the field as a wide receiver than I have from Jakeem Grant. So I think together, if you have Jalen Darden out there as a returner, he now has that ability to step up and potentially be the deep threat and replace Marquise Goodwin with that speed and athleticism. I just think those last two especially have such a great opportunity to find a way onto the 53 if they perform in camp.
Jacob Roach from BrownsWire.com and I are going to step aside, take one more time out. Other side of the break, we'll talk a little bit about Elijah Moore. Sports for CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with Jacob Roach from BrownsWire.com. So a defensive tackle, maybe a third running back. The question is, do the Browns need to add these to the roster? Andrew Berry talked about how he has assembled this roster and just where it sits.
I would say this, we feel good about the roster in general. I mean, it remains to be seen, the competition of like starting spots versus maybe more supporting roles, within the offense or defense. But we feel good about the competition that we have across the roster, and are looking forward to guys. Some guys will assume bigger roles. Some guys will take another step in their career, and how that all shakes out, that's what the next several weeks are for.
And Jacob, when you think about what he's saying, he realizes there's, and injury may dictate this and change it. He realizes there's some spots, towards the back end of that 53, but there's no rush to fill them because there's going to be 900 plus free agents come cut down day because everybody gets cut on the same day.
Yeah, this is the really interesting litmus test. You only have to cut them down one time. Are teams going to wait to that final cut, or will they still start cutting people throughout the summer in August and as we're getting up? I'm really intrigued by that change to see how that actually plays out. He later in that presser said something really interesting about the defensive tackle position when he said, we'll reevaluate it in the middle of camp. And I think that is very telling of players like Maurice Hurst and Tristan Hill, in which they gave kind of lottery ticket contracts and said, hey, these are two guys that have plenty of upside. They've shown flashes. They've had some injury history. Tristan Hill had some things where he fell asleep in a meeting when Isaiah Thomas was speaking, so there's some maybe maturity issues. I don't know, however you want to categorize that. But you're looking at these players that they brought in. They got extra time in camp. They got an extra preseason game because of the Hall of Fame game coming up next Thursday. And I think he's in such a great position to sit there and look at it and be like, I can give these bottom, 30 players on the roster a really good shot to prove themselves before the end of camp so that I can make decisions if I have to. If in the middle of camp, you're like Maurice Hurst, Tristan Hill's not working, you have the ability then to bring somebody in and still have a couple of weeks. And I really think that this extra time really sets the Browns up to really polish the final probably 7 or 8 spots of the roster.
All right, I know, again, you've written an article for Browns Wire and have talked about this. The importance of and the role of Elijah Moore, and how does he help this offense?
I'm so excited for Elijah Moore, Dave. I can't even begin to tell you. He was my favorite player in that draft class. And it's just, we have seen it in OTAs. We've seen it in mandatory minicamp and already in training camp. And I understand they haven't put the pads on quite yet, so we'll see how that changes. But he's been in the backfield as a running back. He's been in the backfield with Nick Chubb as a running back and somebody that can fly out and catch the ball out of the backfield. He's lined up in the slot. He's lined up out wide. He is this Swiss Army knife, I think, with the skill set to go vertical, to beat you with yards after the catch if you just get him out in open space. I just think that he is the linchpin for this offense because he can do everything that I think they've missed. I mean, we've talked about it. I know you and I last summer had these conversations about how they were playing very inside the red zone on the whole field because they couldn't get vertical. If he can get that true vertical speed, that helps Amari Cooper, that helps Donovan Peoples-Jones. And I think him being this X factor is going to be kind of this chain reaction in which everybody else on the offense gets better because you have to respect the verticality and the yards after catch, and you got to kind of cheat to his side when he's out wide. And when he's in the backfield, especially if he's in the backfield with Nick Chubb, you're like, oh, what am I supposed to do here, man? So I think that just the athleticism, the yards after the catch, the straight vertical speed, I just think he's the linchpin. I think he could really take this offense to another level.
He's the guy, and they didn't have this before. If you see a defender playing off of him 4 or 5 yards, you get him the ball, and he makes it at least 3 and possibly 30 very easily. And that's what he does to this offense. All right, before I let you go, AFC North record predictions. You've written about this. You've got the Bengals 12-5 winning the division, the Browns 11-6, Ravens 10-7, and the Steelers finishing at 8-9. There was another one that I saw which had all of them winning 10 games last year. No division has ever had all teams above 500. I'm with you as far as I think 10, 11 wins is what I'm thinking with the Browns. And I'm with you as well. I don't think they quite catch the Bengals, but if they get off to the type of start they need to, I think that's the key.
Yeah, it's that gauntlet they have starting the season. You know, they're going to get the whole division in the first, 5 weeks, and then they have that early bye and come out against San Francisco. They got to get through that with a winning record. They've got to find a way to be 3-2, 5-1, or I'm sorry, 3-2, 4-1 through that first 5. And if they can get to that 4-1, they can win more than 11 games. For me, I personally, as long as if Watson bounces back, there's not a plethora of injuries, I think the basement for this team, like the floor, is a 10-win season. And that USA Today article had them winning 10 and not making the playoffs. And, oh, boy, that would be tough to swallow.
Yeah, it sure would. But I'm with you. I understand the thought process, and it is a really, really tough division and conference. Jacob Roach, BrownsWire.com. Great stuff. Thanks so much for the time and the insight. Appreciate it, Jacob.
Thanks, Dave. Have a good day, man.
All right, Jacob Roach. Make sure you check him out. Really good stuff with BrownsWire.com. That's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We'll see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow at 4 on Sports for CLE.